Welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Otoma Edje. I'm so excited today to be interviewing the MLK Early College School. They have done something really incredible. I know that they have really been looking at their curriculum over some time, had a chance to go to a museum in Washington, D.C., and have made some incredible changes to their curriculum. So I know they're very busy, but they've taken some time out of their day to join us today. We have a few questions we're going to go ahead and ask them. And we're very lucky to have with us some high school and also junior high students that will be asking questions. So why don't you go ahead and take it away.
Okay, so this is the first one. Can you guys please tell us about your trip you guys took in October last year of the National Museum of African American History in Washington, D.C.? This is for the principal.
Janelle, you want to start?
Okay, so last year in October, we took this super amazing trip to DC, and we visited a lot of really interesting places. Like, I know we did visit a lot of the monuments in DC, and we went to Georgetown and Howard University. And we also, of course, went to the African American Black History Museum. And that, I feel like, was definitely the highlight of our trip. If it wasn't the conversation that we had after the trip, then it was definitely actually being able to be in the museum, because just walking into that museum, it's like a lot of overwhelming emotions that hit you straight when you get off of the elevator and you're on the first floor. And seeing, like, first of all, I think me and my peers, we all think that the elevator was meant to assimilate a slave ship being cramped up and dark. And I know there was this, like, timeline that kept going down as you went, like, lower on the floors. And one, it symbolized dark times, and it also assimilated the slave ship. And it's like, as you were climbing up, you were able to see your, like, people progressing. And even through the progression, it was still a lot of oppression. So it was really just, like, I don't even know what the word is to describe the feeling, because it's a lot of feelings. And having to see how your people are treated, you know, and knowing that you never knew about these things, and knowing that this is the foundation that the country was built off of, and people really did think like that, and that mindset has been passed on. It was a very eye-opening experience.
Kaliah, do you want to add?
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Janelle said. I feel like in general, that whole trip, I feel like it just motivated us to, like, be able to give the students at our school some of the experience that we have, because I feel like I can speak for everyone when we were really enlightened, and that trip really just changed our perspective on what we thought we really did deserve more of our own history, especially as Black students. And I feel like not only did that trip, like, give us a new perspective on what our mission is as student activists, but also it just really allowed us to realize, like, not everyone should have to travel hundreds of miles away to be able to see this beautiful museum and learn more about Black history. It should be available for all Black students, or just all students in general, because our history is beautiful and it deserves to be learned on a wider scale.
Dahni, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, so when we took the trip to the African American History Museum, it was very emotional to all of us. We learned a lot about ourselves and our past. And a lot of us didn't know half of the stuff that was in that museum. So when we walked in there, we were looking at different exhibits and looking at the different floors. There's a lot of stuff that we haven't even seen in our history books and stuff like that. That's the main reason we wanted to come back, so other students have an opportunity to learn what we learned in the museum.
So I think they kind of covered 1 and 2. So do you want to jump, Raphael, to question 3?
Okay.
All right. What did you feel? What did you feel? What was lacking in your curriculum? What do you feel like? What did you feel like?
What was lacking in your curriculum?
Okay. Well, I feel like just positive, first of all, representation of the African American community in general, and then not just representation, but positive representation, because I know that a lot, like, I'm pretty sure anybody will speak to this and say that when you learn about African American history, you only hear about how we were oppressed, and you hear about slavery, you hear about the civil rights, and then you hear a couple names that are repeated over and over and over again about our history. Therefore, everything else that's not included is what is lacking. And that's a big piece of us, like literally. And knowing that when we went into this museum and saw these things, they resonated with us so heavily, and to think like there's so much more for us to learn, and it really could be taught to us, and every kid could know these things, and everybody could be more culturally responsive and educated about everybody and everyone's history, because there is no American history without African American history, and it all works together. So it's not fair to just cut one part of someone's history out and say it didn't exist. So I do feel like that's everything that's not in there is what we lack.
I definitely agree. I also feel like there's so many positive aspects of Black history that we rarely learn about, and we have to do our own research about. For example, Black Wall Street, there were African kings and queens. There's so many, like, even having visited the museum, I still feel like I haven't gotten penetrate the surface level of how many positive aspects of Black history there are. And I feel like that really is purposeful, because when you're only teaching us about the, like how Janelle said, the negative parts of our history with slavery and oppression over and over again, it kind of gives us the perspective that we're always fighting, and we always are fighting, but there's still always going to be good parts about us that are either being ignored or being overshadowed. I feel like a big reason why some people, like, they feel discouraged from being activists, because they feel like, well, when am I ever going to stop fighting? Are things ever going to change? But things have changed in a way, and that's why it's so important to be activists for change, because, like, we've already gone so far since literally decades ago, and we can go so much farther. But it really is motivating to know, like, there are things hundreds of years ago, decades ago, that were like that wouldn't have gone today. For example, us having this platform and being able to talk about Black history, I can guarantee you, back in civil rights, we wouldn't have even been given the stage or the mic to talk about that. I just feel like learning about your history in a positive light can motivate you so much to work and to reverse the oppression that's constantly being faced upon you.
Let's go to the next question.
Teachers like to share what you thought was missing out of history?
That kind of leads into our next question.
Oh.
Hi, this is Shawn. Thank you guys for taking some time out your summer. This is again a question for the fellow teachers. What impacted you the most from your trip to the museum? That's part one. And part two is tell us a little bit about the energy and the steps that you took to kind of change and craft your curriculum to meet your students' needs.
Okay, I'll go first. What impacted me the most in the museum was, Janelle mentioned it earlier, just that feeling of being completely overwhelmed. I have a degree in history. I spent 4 years in college and a lot of money to learn about the world and the people in the world. And then in 2 days, like, it completely just shattered everything that, like, all the confidence that I thought I had in my historical knowledge. There was so much that I didn't know that I was never taught in school, both in high school and in college. That was completely missing. And it was really overwhelming to think, like, I don't know this history. I'm now stepping into it and, like, trying to educate myself, but I also want to educate others on that. And so it was a really large undertaking. When we got back to the museum that first night, we sat down as a team, and throughout the museum, we were all taking notes. We had notebooks, we were taking pictures with our phone, we were taking videos, and the whole time thinking, what is it, you know, for the classes that I teach or the classes that the other teachers teach, what exactly do I want to bring into my curriculum, or what do I want to just drop out of my curriculum completely and replace? And so when we got back to the museum, we sat down together as a team. We talked about what we had seen that first day and just reflected with each other, and immediately started just kind of listing out what it was that we wanted to bring back into our classes and what we wanted to focus on moving forward.
Could you just repeat that question for me, just so I can answer all parts of it?
Tell us about just what impacted you the most, you know, at your trip. And then two, just something, maybe you could tell us about some of the steps that you took, you know, to kind of include, you know, those things into your curriculum, you know, as you try to, you know, meet your students' needs.
Yeah, okay, thank you, I appreciate that. My name is Mr. Kelly. I teach African American and then world history at MLK. And the trip for me was extremely powerful in that the students advocated for us to want to go there, and the students led that charge and said, we want our teachers to go to this museum. And that was really powerful for me, that it was them coming back to us and saying, we want you to go to this museum. I took it really, really seriously. I tried to approach it from an academic lens at first, but you really experience it in an emotional capacity as well. It's a lot of history to take in at one time. So the first day I really had to experience it and put my notebook down. And then the second day I was able to really take notes and take it in. And I encourage, if you all have the opportunity to go to it, I'm from the Washington, D.C. area, and it's by far the best museum out of the museums that are there. Now, in terms of curriculum, one of the things that Ms. Grayson has offered is we got to attend a Black History conference run by the University of Missouri, at the Carter Center. LeGarrette King is the director of it. And so a good chunk of our history department, our social studies department, attended that conference. And we're building on what these young ladies have been talking about. So, for example, in world history, making sure that it's not just the American or the French Revolution that is being talked about, but I'm really adamant that the Haitian Revolution is covered in detail. And the African American history course is getting completely revamped. And I could go on and about it, but it's going to include everything from Nat Turner's rebellion and different types of resistance to the Underground Railroad. So that's just a little bit.
Rachel?
Yeah, I hope you guys can hear me. I'm having some Zoom issues today. Our kids are so well spoken and can they're so good at talking about their trip and what they've learned. I'm looking up a quote on my phone that I saw, and actually I think Brendan, you presented this quote today in your presentation. Give me 1 second because it totally, here it is. This is so I'm one of the assistant principals and I'm over social studies at MLK, and I went once with all the students, and then I went with all the social studies teachers, and that's when we sat in the, I'll never forget it, we sat in this dark conference room in the hotel and kind of grouped all the tables together, and we're like, we have to rewrite everything that the district has given us. Mm-hmm. And a rewrite is not just sprinkling in people that you think are important for our kids to learn about. And so this quote really resonated with me. It says, teach through Black people, not about Black people. And I'm like, man, if there's a quote that white people all over the country and world need to hear about when they're rewriting curriculum, that is the quote. Because, I went to small town high school in Wisconsin, 4-year college, grad school, and I kept learning, I think like Janelle was saying, about the same Black individuals over and over and over again. And I was embarrassed when I went to the History Museum, to be honest. I was taken aback. I was like, man, I am a well-educated woman. I've been at MLK for 10 years, leading social studies teachers and English teachers. And those 2 trips, I realized like I have to totally rethink how I'm preparing my teachers to teach. We're so ingrained as educators and as leaders to think about standards and testing and standards. And yes, that's still important, but we have to totally change the avenue in which we're doing that work. So, I was bawling today. I'm sure the kids won't be surprised about that. Watching the Today Show, but I was just so proud of the work, working for Kimberly. God, I'm tearing up again now. So I'll stop talking, but everybody's worked so hard and our kids have deserved this forever. Yeah. Ooh, really red in the eyes. Okay. Next question.
All right, so how was your, this is a student question, yeah. How has your newfound knowledge impacted you? How did it impact your outlook on the world?
Okay, so I think I could speak to that a little bit, because just being able to take in any little bit of the information that I have has changed. Like every single piece of information that I've taken in since that trip has really changed my life. And just educating myself about my history definitely has also changed my life. And it's crazy because it made me really value perspective a lot. People's perspective on each other, people's perspectives of themselves. And it really made me see like how history alters the perspectives of how people think about themselves and others. And I know another thing was when we were doing our first podcast episode, and we were talking about the 4th of July and Juneteenth and the difference between the two. And we were reading this text by Frederick Douglass, What to the Slave is the 4th of July, that he wrote in 1852. And he, through all of his struggles and like all of the oppression that people were facing at that time, he was still able to find optimism in it. And for me, that was something that opened my eyes up. That text itself opened my eyes up to so much, because the fact that he was still able to be optimistic, knowing that there's change to come in the future, and things will be better, and there's a point in where things will change. I'll say the fire that had already been lit under me, it like threw some gasoline on top of that fire, because it's like, what's to say that this year isn't that year? 2020, with all the stuff that's been going on and the craziness, the pandemic, the quarantine, everything, what's to say that this isn't that year? And it really made me think, like, we have this voice, and I don't feel like it's a coincidence that in all of this, there's protests and people are out there losing their lives, and people have been fighting and losing their lives to get this voice that we have right now. And people nationally, never would I have ever thought my face would be on a TV screen for people to see nationally. But it's like, you really just start to see how things can fall into place and how you can bring change. And it's like, this experience just from the trip and everything that's happened after has impacted my life so much and has definitely changed it. It changed the way that I look at others, the way that I perceive things, me just wanting to be a better person in myself, and help other people do good. So, yeah.
I definitely agree. I feel like like Janelle, I've always had a passion about like topics like just Black excellence and think issues that pertain to Black people. But I honestly feel like when you're in an environment so diverse, it can almost feel discouraged to talk about things that are unique to you. And like, not saying like people have discouraged me in the past from talking about Black issues, but I feel like being even more educated about my own history and like knowing my worth, like genuinely knowing my worth, it's made me a lot more bold and like not sit down and be quiet about things that really like affect me. And I feel like I can guarantee you, not even feel like I can guarantee you, like last year, middle school, elementary school, I've always had these thoughts and I've always been passionate about these things. I would talk about them with people who are willing to listen. But I would have never like gone on the TV, gone in front of a microphone, gone in front of a camera and said the things that I've said right now. I just feel like that's an testament because my entire life I've been like, I feel like you ask any teacher I've ever had, I've been kind of shy in certain environments. And I feel like for all the shy kids out there that are really passionate about things but don't know how to maybe communicate their thoughts or how to like put themselves out there effectively, I feel like scenarios like this where like I've gotten the opportunity to speak my mind and put my thoughts out there and like not be afraid of being called wrong or saying like I'm talking too much about certain issues, I feel like that's really like made me realize like I can have a self-esteem and I can talk about things I want to talk about and I can be proud of my Blackness. I can be proud of who I am as a person. I feel like experiences like this, like not only being surrounded by people like me who have thoughts like me and like are passionate about what we want to do, but I feel like if anything, it's made it easier for me to go out and tell people what I think. And I feel like every student should feel like that because nobody should have to feel like they don't have a space to talk about what they want to talk about. I just feel like it's just so important that people, like regardless of if you have the resources or a camera or time or space, try to get your thoughts out there because so many people can benefit from them and you don't even know.
I definitely agree with Kaliah. I feel like Kaliah and Janelle. I feel like learning more about my own history has brought this courage upon me where I feel more comfortable being around people who don't look like me to talk about myself and talk about topics like Black. And it's just, all of this is kind of overwhelming being in the TV. And it's just very surprising, but I feel like it made me feel like I'm a better person and that I could be more vocal about who I am and show others that I can do this, we can move past this and stuff like that.
Angel, are you going to jump in?
Yeah, I feel like what I've heard overall is that it's a self-worth thing. I'm a very shy and quiet student. I just like to sit in the classroom and just get my work done and then just be on my way, right? And I've always had like, I'm very confident in my education and I love learning about new things. But to learn about my own education and to learn about my Black education, it's deeper than just learning. It's a self-worth thing. History can do a lot for society and the world in general. What it did for me is it helped me know my self-worth. Like, there's no doubt in my mind that I am very confident about who I am now and comfortable with my Blackness, like Kaliah said. And no one can change my mind about that because now I know who I am. And like Maya Angelou said, you can't know where you're going if you don't know where you've been. And now that I know where I've been, I know exactly where I'm going. And I feel so deprived that it's been taken away from me for so long now. And now that I have access to it, I'm never letting go of my Black history again.
Okay. What advice? Oh, wait, is it for the next question?
Yeah.
Okay. That's what I was thinking. I was like, oh, sorry. Okay. So, what advice do you have for other schools that would want you to change their curriculum?
And is there a way we can access the changes you guys have made to your curriculum? That's an additional question.
That's for the principal.
Okay, wait. So should I just speak on the advice part and then Ms. Grayson talk about the access?
Sure.
Okay. So you asked what advice do I have for other students or other schools that want to schools? I think that honestly, I would say listen to your students more than anything, because honestly, with none of this would have ever happened if it wasn't for the students. And none of this would have happened if those students didn't have support. But if the idea had never been put out there, or we had never voiced our opinion, like, none of this would have happened. And I feel like there's so much greatness that lies in schools and within, like, bodies of students that people don't even realize because of the fact that they never look into it. They never really ask the right questions, and they never, it's like they overlook the youth voice. And it's crazy because we're the ones that, I feel like, one, teachers and staff can learn just as much as they teach. So in a school, it's really not just the teacher that's teaching. It's also the students that are teaching the teachers. I'm pretty sure any one of my teachers could say that's true. And I feel like you're not going to be able to make those changes without the kids. So if there are schools out here that want these changes, I'd say my advice would be to speak to the kids and ask them how they feel about what they're learning. Ask them what they feel like they're missing. Ask them if they feel represented in their history classes, or in any classes in general, their English classes with literature. There's a lot of stuff, and I feel like ask the kids.
I can chime in here too. And
go ahead.
Karch, you can chime in. We actually just got off a call with a school that does want to implement changes in their curriculum, and like, implement change really means just rewriting everything. And it's tough because if I'm a brand new teacher and I'm being told, or I'm teaching geography, it's tough for a new teacher to know how to adequately weave in Black history and history that their kids can see themselves in. And it's easy for people to say, well, this doesn't fit in my curriculum. And if a teacher says that, then we have a huge mind shift change to make, versus let's just open up your curriculum and sprinkle in some changes. So I think, like, the planning session that we just had with some other middle school teachers went well. And Karch, you can add in, but I think it got them thinking, like, oh, I have to take this curriculum that I've been given and burn it and completely start over in a way that's actually going to teach and best represent my students. And that it's tough work, but it's really rewarding work. Karch, what's your take on it?
Very tough work. And like Janelle said, I think the number one thing you can do is speak to your students and ask them, what do you feel is missing? Do you feel represented? And then the next most important thing is you have to educate yourself. You can't stand in front of 150 kids a day trying to teach them about Black history if you don't know Black history yourself. So you have to be invested in it. You have to know that these changes are vital to the success of all people in our country. And you have to educate yourself. And then you also have to realize that it's a long process. It's not something where you can snap your fingers and say, I changed the curriculum. It takes a really long time, and there are a lot of revisions. All the work that we did in November, the changes that we made, we've gone back and we've even made even more changes. And we know that this year, it's still not going to be perfect, and that it's going to be a continual process. And of course, social studies is always changing, right? History is always happening. But there are always those, revisions that will be made to make it better and stronger every single time. But you have to be invested in what you're doing. You have to understand the importance of it. And you have to educate yourself. But then also be patient with the process as well, because it takes some time.
Ms. Grayson?
As a building leader, you have to lay the foundation, and you have to start with the work of equity. You have to start with building trust with your faculty. If you don't have the foundation of trust, this work cannot start.
Yep.
You can't walk into a building and start a conversation. As easy as some may think, you and I know, you cannot walk into a building and start a conversation with the race Black and think that changes are going to happen overnight. You have to build trust. You have to have a foundation of equity. And your staff has to know that you will support them 100% in professional development, in patience, in learning, and 100% you will back them to make sure that you will see this through to fruition. And in the same time, I will stand in the gap to make sure that my student voices are being heard. And so it takes a leader that's willing to kind of like, you know, play the shuffle game in between parents, community, district.
Right.
And be willing to take on that role and understand that there's going to be highs and lows, but once we get through it all, the reward is going to be great. The leader has to understand it's not going to happen overnight. I've been at this school. This is year 8. There's no way this work would have happened year 1 through 3. There's foundation that has to be built. There's no way that a leader can have this work done like on my own. I couldn't do this on my own. I have to have a team of people to do this work with me, right? And my team is my students. That student voice is powerful. Then right alongside of the student voice is the history department, the teachers that went to see it firsthand. I think I froze there, but the team of people that's with me, alongside me, my students, that student voice is powerful. And then second to none of the student voice is my staff. The staff that went with me to the African American Museum, the teachers that went to see it firsthand. And together with that team, you have them help to change your entire staff. And so any administrator that's looking to change or to make this change, they have to intentionally know who was on their team, create your team. But that team has to consist of students.
Thank you. Well, we want to thank all of you just for participating in this discussion. I know you have another meeting coming up very soon, so we want to be disciplined with time. But I do feel like this is a team effort because if I remember correctly, I believe Ms. Grayson, you kind of started the ball rolling by having the kids go to Washington, D.C., but then they took it from there and said, we need to have our teachers see this. And the teachers had the heart on that Friday night and said, you know what, we need to tear up some pages. And the teachers got working and so forth. And so I just want to say it's a total team effort. Every single person, you know, you guys all work together to get this done. And I think it's for the betterment of the, you know, African-American children that are growing up for their own self-esteem, their own self-worth in the image of God. Myself as a Christian, I don't think any person should look down on themselves because of their race. And, you know, I also think for, you know, our young interviewers, Raphael and Darrius and the older one in the middle there, you know, they're the next ones coming up. And so this is perhaps a lesson also just to encourage them. So we want to thank you for your time. If you guys enjoyed this episode, definitely please subscribe. What I would like, Ms. Grayson, if you could maybe send me some information that I can include in the show notes. So if people want to contact you, they can, to learn more and maybe get something going in their school. Well, thanks again. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.